For the past 3 years, I've released a podcast every single year that is a supercut of interviews with multiple guests where I ask them how they try and prevent burnout in education. Considering I've done interviews with more than 70 guests on this podcast, I highly recommend going back and listening to those episodes, as this year's episode is relatively short. I've only interviewed 5 people since last year because I've actively been working on trying to improve the podcast solo episodes. In this set of excerpts from interviews with various guests over the last year, not only have I asked them about how they try and prevent burnout in education, but I've also focused some of those questions around how you try and prevent burnout when you're working on equity work in relation to education. So many of the guests are going to talk specifically about how they handle that. And we're going to start with episode 154, which is titled Decolonizing Education through SEL and PBL with Matinga Ragatz.
One of the things that's cathartic is to learn empathy by listening to the other side. It really has brought me to my knees. I have family members who are polar of values and political religious thinking, yet listening to them, I've understood that sometimes, especially when you have a liberal point of view, you tend to be a colonizer.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do in my work, I go into places in the United States where, like I'll go to rural America, where some of these things are not traditionally. In other words, one of the things the places that I've really polished my journey is understanding that myself, when I bring my knowledge or my wisdom or my thinking, I too can be doing the same thing. What I am saying, project-based learning, the idea of allowing autonomy is against the norm, the culture there. I am bringing them things that are no different than a missionary going to Africa and telling them that this is the only way that you can have a happy life. Imagine going into the Amish with ideas about, some of our ideas that we have, and then somehow judging them because, oh my gosh, they don't get it. So it's brought me to my knees in all of these things that I am constantly thinking about and researching about. What's the goal? What's the end game? Where's the plot going, right? Because if I'm talking equity, I'm talking equity. And if I can go to a different culture in a country and respect that culture for it is, I better be going to places in America where people are polar opposite and respect that culture for what it is. That has been something that's blown my mind. Like looking at, for example, red versus blue, those are two cultures. And if we can go into each other's territory, understanding that you're going to somebody's culture, values and thinking, man, I thought I was right this whole time. But my opinion is a grain of sand.
The next excerpt is from episode 156, which is titled, See What Had Happened with Andre Doughty.
I'm still working on that. I think a lot of our educators are still working on that. One thing that I did do, and COVID kind of helped me realize it, was COVID allowed so many people just to slow down and stop and breathe and kind of reset what things were. Because at one time, for me, it was, I want to help this school, help that school, help this school, go to this conference, help this school, keynote over here, help this, help. And I was such on the go, I was starting to miss some of the things that were important. So it kind of helped me slow down just a little, and I appreciate it. Now, every Friday, I try my best to have a self-care day. And for me, that could be something as simple as watching YouTube videos on all of my watch lists that, oh, that looks interesting. Going down the rabbit hole of this, that, or the other on TikTok, or playing PlayStation. I don't get to play it very often, but when I do, I have a good time. And so just trying to find those moments to pull away, get away from tech, get away from work, and just recentering myself in whatever way. Another thing that I do every morning, I exercise. Weekends, I take off. Weekends are like my cheat weekends. But Monday through Friday, man, I'm hitting that gym. I'm hitting it hard just to ground myself. Like you said, it's a lot of heavy work. And sometimes you find that you can't shift perspective. You see some of your friends, some of your family who are just racist, and it hurts your heart because you've known them for X amount of years and they've never ever said or felt that way. And now they say and they feel that way. And once when you confront them, they stand firm on that feeling. And you say to yourself, well, I can no longer be with you. I can no longer hang around you. I can no longer support your thinking in that way. And that's heavy. That's hurtful. That's emotionally, it puts a drain on you. So being able to pull away and just to reset, to rest, to relax. Some of my teacher friends, the way that they do it, they go shopping. I've seen a lot of people on Amazon, seeing a lot of Amazon packages in this house. My wife is one of them who does that. I've seen them also like try new hobbies, pickleball, never heard of it. It was never played in the hood, but all of a sudden there's a pickleball court maybe about 10, 15 minutes away. And I've heard a lot of my teacher friends saying they want to try pickleball. Just once again, given the opportunity to pull away from that. How do you deal with it, man?
So many of what you just said. Like yesterday I did like a drum stream. So myself practicing, like trying to just help people. Here's how I practice. Here's how you might practice. But before that, I did an Elden Ring stream. So it was like me trying to show, hey, look, you can have fun playing video games and not like rage quit and throw your controller through the window kind of a thing. Like, so I do a lot of that. I also do workout. Like I have a Thai bag downstairs, so I do Muay Thai. I built a stall bar with my dad so I can like work on gymnastics, strength training stuff. Like I try my best to be as healthy as I can, because especially reading and writing and engaging in like equity related work, like there's a lot of things to unpack. Like I worked on a curriculum for the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming, which has the Northern Arapaho and Eastern Shoshone tribes. And when you actually go through the history of like what happened to them in that reservation, like it's so disheartening. Like it's saddening to see like this is how we treated other people, like as a country, as the government. Like, so yeah, I try and have many different things that I can do to just help center myself and focus on things that I can control while still engaging in the difficult work.
Yeah. And one of the best pieces of advice I got from, it was a student. Student was on Twitter, and you know how you go through the Twitter threads and something's viral and you want to read the comments because the comments is the best part of the viral whatever. And this one student was like, you and I are both way too smart on this subject. I'm not going to waste my time with you. And that was it. And then the other person, perhaps a troll, kept attacking, and the student kept replying, you and I are way too smart for this. I'm not going to waste my time with this. It hit me because oftentimes I'm really, on social media, social justice warrior. I'm like, but here's research, and here's stats, and here's a website, and here's a video, here's a TikTok, here's somebody what they said, this is their words. And the entire time I'm like, they just want to argue. So let me just keep scrolling. It's not worth the fight. Locally, right here in Oklahoma right now, a lot of online social media stuff has been Brent Venables versus Lincoln Riley. Was Lincoln Riley wrong? Why did Lincoln Riley leave Oklahoma? Lincoln. And you can just see the comment threads, and it's not worth it. He chose what he chose. It was a business decision. He got a free personal jet. That's what he wanted to do. It's no longer worth people commenting. It's not worth it. The people who are baiting and trolling, perhaps this is what they're doing. So for me, one of the best stress reliefs ever is to not comment and just say, okay, that's what they want to believe. All right. And it's like you said, it's a fine balance of it. Because there are some times that you do need to step in and speak up and say, before this becomes more misinformation and more lies, here's a resource I'd like for you to read, or here's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard being somebody who like identifies through and through as an educator, like somebody who wants to help people learn things. Like when it comes to problematic behavior, it's hard to sometimes be like, to not say, hey, here's a resource that can help you, when the people are just not willing to engage in a discussion. Like if it's more of a monologue that I'm trying to have a dialogue, like at some point it's just like, okay, I provided some resources. I hope eventually you get to a place where you are able to dive deeper into it.
Yeah. And I'll give them two. I'll give them two chances. We'll dialogue 2 rounds. And if the needle's not shifting, or if you're not even open to the needle shifting, all right, it's been great having a conversation with you. I look forward to more, because you're just putting more weight and pressure on you. And some people are doing it just to troll. Other people, they just want to read. And so you're speaking your truth and you're speaking your voice and you're giving opportunities for learning. They're just going to have to pick it up on their own time.
And the next excerpt is from episode 165, which is titled Intersections of Equity, Making, and Computer Science with Roxana Hadad.
I do think there's little wins that I can focus on. And that could be just a discussion with a school leader. It could just be, an uptick on one data point or something. You really have to celebrate the tiny wins, because they're tiny and they will be tiny, but like they are big for some kids somewhere. So those are the things that you really have to focus on. In addition, like I make sure to work out like every day, and I try to work out as hard as possible to get all the stress and anxiety out. I meditate, I play with my kids, I try to go on hikes. It is draining work. One of the concerns I have is like what I see happening to school leaders is that they feel like they don't have agency, that, they're just a cog in the machine kind of thing sometimes, because they are part of a system that can perpetuate oppression, and they sort of don't feel like they have the ability to make changes. That is what happens when you focus on the bigger picture only, and like, oh my God, we're not making big gains. But, I specifically remember like this one kid in my makerspace saying like, oh, I know I want to go to college and I know I want to do computer science now. Like that kid was maybe 15 years ago, but I still remember him because I'm like, that was a difference for that one kid. That was like that one kid, like you have to find your meaning. And for me, that was like meaning. And it's not like because I feel like all kids should major in computer science and go to college. It's more that I helped that kid find his path. And, he's a Latino. He was somebody who wasn't one of the represented students. So really focusing on, those tiny little wins are the only way that I think we're going to survive doing this equity work constantly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I am privileged in that, like the content that I create, that's freely available, like whether it's the lesson plans that boot up or this podcast or whatever, like it can spread to a lot of people and have potential impact. But I don't see that impact because I'm not in the classroom and I don't hear teachers respond. It wasn't until CSTA National this summer where like people were like, hey, I recognize your voice. And, like I listen to your podcast. I'm like, whoa, people listen? Like I don't know, because it doesn't feel like I get that immediate responses. Like when I worked in the classroom and when I was working one-on-one with a kid, you could see that like engagement and whatnot. So it's a different kind of work.
I feel bad, Jared. Like I listen to your podcast and I don't ever like, I think maybe once, and it was because it was a paper that like we had written, but like, I mean, they're all so good. So I'll be sure to remember to like call you out on Twitter. So you get that little win, that little bit of endorphin.
Somebody listened.
Somebody listened.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a weird, like this last year, I started like sharing gaming and drumming stuff like on my YouTube channel and whatnot. That has been weird as well, because like I'm at almost 1 million views now, and it's like, it doesn't feel like there's hundreds of thousands of people who have engaged with my content, but there has been, which is neat.
I mean, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So that is something I want to learn more from you about. So I talked about the ways that like, I work out, I hike. I have my art background, but it has been so hard for me to really get back into that. Like my life has really been just really like computer science work and family. And I've just been so impressed with how you do the drumming, the gaming, the CS educations, like stuff. And you still read research. How do you do that?
Well, part of it is not having children. So that makes it so I have a lot more time than my peers.
Sure.
That's like a huge, like one of the number one things. My wife is also a very busy type A individual, and I mean that in the best way possible. So because we're both so busy, like we do schedule in time for each other. And then outside of that, I'm planning on gaming on like Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday evenings with one of my friends who's across the country. Like I try and make sure I do that. And like with the music side of things, it's the same thing. Like on Saturdays and Sundays, I try and stream in the morning, and it holds me accountable because now I'm going to practice publicly. Like it's making it so that I am almost being like forced to do that. Like with the podcast, when I do the Unpacking Scholarship episodes, one of the reasons why I do that is because if I don't have a guest lined up, cool, I can just release an episode on my own. It's not reliant on anyone, don't have to put pressure, etc. But the other reason why is it forces me to stay on top of like recent research and to just keep learning and reading, because otherwise I'll find something else to do because there's always a billion things to do. But when it comes down to it, like one of the things that I really learned in the last 2 years in particular, like during COVID, is I need to have a clear separation between what I do in my 40-hour work week and what I do in my leisure. And so I'm trying to have very distinct start and end points for that. And so like in the mornings, like I'll do workouts like you were saying, but then like, let's say I start at 8 o'clock, work an 8-hour day. I will then do cardio at the end of the day to kind of put like a cap on that and say, now I'm done for the day. Now I'm going to focus on doing other stuff like video editing for the gaming content, or like playing video games or hanging out with my wife or whatever. So having that separation has helped, because I am the kind of person who won't stop working. I'm technically, even though it's like leisure, I'm working on gaming and drumming stuff and putting out social media content like a lot. But I previously would only do computer science stuff nonstop. But because now I'm doing multiple things, it keeps it fresh. So when I come back to the CS stuff, like I'm like, oh, this is something different and new that I wasn't doing on the weekend. And then when it's on the weekend or the weeknight, I'm like, oh, now I get to work on this other thing.
Some of the challenges, like now, I love working from home, but I do think it's making it challenging for me to like make hard stops as to when work time is and when not work time is.
Yeah. One of the things that I also did was I actually had the office in a separate location from my leisure. And so when I'd go into that office, this is privilege of having the space for that, then it was work mode. And when I exited the office, I would shut the door and I'm done for the day or the weekend or whatever. And I would not focus on that. Now I've kind of put myself into a little bit of a pickle in that like there's 2 drum sets in here and a marimba, and like this is where I make music and have fun. This is also where I game, but it's also where I work. So I try and like do my best to make sure that like I am still mentally separating those, and I'm not thinking about work outside of it, and I'm not thinking about like drumming and gaming when I'm working, etc. But sometimes easier said than done.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I don't know if I can do that, but I can try.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned though, with working out, but also the meditation side of things, like that has helped to try and refocus thoughts. Whether it's like, I'm going to do a gratitude meditation. So for 20 minutes, I'm just going to focus on things I'm grateful for, or focus on an object like my dog and just like petting her, or just like even just sitting outside and looking at the birds who are like eating from the bird feeder. Like that kind of attention training almost has been really helpful for being able to focus my mind on work or focus my mind on leisure and being intentional in that moment.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, I am such an avid meditator. I wonder what a mess I would be without it. Like, has this, like, I mean, like, because I feel like my mind is chaos, like, with it. So maybe, I don't know, it probably has helped me in ways that I don't see.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't do any of it until I went to a therapist, because I was on the edge of suicidality, and in like high school and undergrad, I was suicidal for the majority of that period of time. And when I went to a therapist, she had me start doing yoga, and I did it an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. And I did that every single day for weeks, and like just to feel the change in my body and whatnot. Like I know what the before and the after is like. And so I try to be very intentional about working out, about getting my sleep, about eating healthy, about meditating, because I know where it will take me when I don't do that kind of stuff. And so I'm extremely grateful, even though, like you're saying, like, even though I do all these things, like I still get stressed out, etc. But I know I'd be in a much worse place if I didn't do all of these things.
Yeah, totally. No, it's so important for me to do every day. And it's not a good day when I don't do those things.
Yep. The next excerpt is from episode 173, which is titled Empathetic Listening and Computer Science with Josh Sheldon.
So I'm not always great at it. One of my symptoms is depression, and that can be exacerbated by, or at least correlated with, observations on where I feel like the world is going. Yeah. That said, I believe in the richness of humanity and the enlivening capabilities of just shared effort and shared joy. Just doing things together as a team with other people is very, very important to me and contributes to my well-being. Being around other people frequently contributes to my well-being. Things like singing together. Just intentionally making opportunities to be joyful together, even in hard times. And, I can't even pretend to understand the African American experience, the Black experience in this country. But I can see the power in, song and joy in their communities that I have to think can provide some solace in hard times.
And the final excerpt is from episode 189, which is titled Computational Literacies with Michael Horn.
I mean, I think it's just really hard. I see this, happening, like people just throw themselves into work like there's no other, there's nothing else that's important in life. It's really hard because you can, like, if you're not actively trying to prevent it, like avoid it, like our culture is just geared. And it's not just academia. Like I think it's any number of different kinds of jobs that are just sort of geared up to burn you out as quickly as possible unless you are actively working to prevent it. And so like part of me is like kind of figuring out, like, there are things I really, really love about my job. I love teaching, love working with students. I love going into 5th grade classrooms. I really like writing when I can, and so just recognizing the things that like really bring you joy, making sure that you have time to do those things, but it's hard. It's really hard to avoid burnout. And yeah, I don't know. How do you avoid burnout?
Oh, so many different approaches. It's one of the reasons why I ask like each guest is because I want to learn from them so I can figure it out. Like you were mentioning the thinking time while walking. So I use the Pomodoro method where I'll work for 50 minutes, and then I'll take a 10-minute walking break where like I'll just be on my treadmill and I might listen to a podcast or listen to music or like play a video game because I have a TV mounted on it, things like that, just to give me that time to move, because I'm the kind of person where if I don't set an alarm, I won't stop working, and then I'll be like, oh wow, I haven't eaten in a few hours and it's like dark outside and I didn't even realize that.
Right.
So there's that. There's just like setting very clear boundaries with like, at this time of day I'm going to stop working on this thing and like focus on like hanging out with my wife, etc.
Yeah.
I have to be very structured. Like you'll notice while I was like in this conversation, I was drinking a liquid salad. Like that makes it so that I don't have to sit down and eat. I can just like drink my lunch while having a conversation. Like things like this, just little things that make it so it saves me 5-10 minutes here or there. It all adds up in the end so that I can be more intentional with my time, my energy, my attention, etc. throughout the day.
I don't think this is right, but I think that the burden of avoiding burnout is on the individuals who are, that it's rare that you find a job that structurally supports you in like not getting burnt out. And it's also a problem was like, if I just did what I was contractually obligated to do, I don't think I would feel burnt out, but I love doing all of these other things and I throw myself into projects and and I think that that's the danger also of being a creative person is that, we get excited about building things and doing things and creating things. And then and that's all on top of everything else. And I think, I don't have good solutions for you.
And that concludes all the excerpts from last year's interviews. As a friendly reminder, in the show notes, you can find excerpts from more than 70 other podcast interviews where we specifically talk about how to prevent burnout in computer science education. Also in the show notes, I'll include a link to a presentation that I did with Jen Manley that specifically talks about some more suggestions for preventing burnout in education. So make sure you check that out in the show notes at jaredoleary.com. If you enjoyed this episode, consider listening to the full interviews or sharing this or the other burnout episodes with somebody else that you know. Just trying to help the field out because it's a difficult profession. Stay tuned next week for another episode. Until then, I hope you're all staying safe and are having a wonderful week.